lot of craziness going on in the NBA, so let's get right into it. I don't even think it's the biggest news, but some non-actual basketball playing news in the NBA was the draft lottery going down just last night for us as of recording this podcast. And Kevin's Orlando Magic, his hometown team, is getting the number one pick.
Yeah, no, I mean the buzz is real. Let me tell you something. I mean, all my Magic friends here in the city, definitely excited about it. And I mean, look,
Yeah.
what I've always said with the Magic is they have a ton of great young players. Like all their surrounding cast was in place. They just needed that one guy, that superstar level guy that you kind of build everything around. And the roster, I think, could be a lot better here sooner than later. Like they could have
Yeah.
one of those like Cleveland Cavaliers type rise, right? Where everything just kind of falls into place at once and they actually start competing and winning meaningful games. And look, I'm right here with it. I mean, they're going to have obviously this is a draft where the number one isn't as clear cut. Like last year, everyone knew Kate Cunningham was going one, for example, or the Zion year. Everyone knew Zion Williamson was going one. Like there was no real doubt about that. Here, like the Magic could genuinely go three different ways. Like, Chet Holmgren, I think right now is the betting favorite, but they could very well go Jabari Smith. They could go Paolo Banchero. So I think, we'll see what happens over the workouts here for the next couple of weeks. But I mean, yeah, for the Magic, it's the first time they've had the number one pick since Dwight Howard. Obviously, that worked out pretty well. The other two times they've had the number one picks have been Penny Hardaway and Shaq. So I would also largely worked out pretty well. But no, I mean, definitely like exciting or palpable excitement for the Magic. And obviously selfishly living in Orlando, I'm biased here a little bit. When the Magic do well, I think you can feel it in the city.
Yeah.
But across the board, so just running down the results here real quick. Last night, the Magic have number one, the Thunder are two, the Rockets three, the Kings four. They jumped. The Pistons 5, the Pacers 6, the Trailblazers 7, the Pelicans 8. That's via the Lakers. The Spurs 9, the Wizards 10, the Knicks 11. The Thunder pick again at 12. That's via the Clippers in the Paul George trade. The Hornets at 13. The Cavaliers at 14. So again, the Kings the biggest jump. I believe they were 8 given their odds. They got up to number 4. So it's obviously good for them. The Trailblazers back in the lottery for the first time in a while. They'll be picking here at 7. So we'll see what they can do there. The Thunder 2 picks, number 2, number 12. Obviously, the Thunder having tremendous success with Kevin Durant picking it 2 once upon a time. I think if they get anything close to that, that'll be looking quite good there in Oklahoma City. But no, I mean, in terms of the draft itself, I mean, again, this is the one where I think there's a lot of intrigue in this one in the sense that there's not that clear consensus number one overall pick. Like I do think as we get closer to the actual draft itself, we'll have a much better idea of who Orlando is taking. But, really here in the top 3 with OKC and then with Houston, this could play out a number of different ways. And I'm interested to see how the board falls because I think, teams obviously go into the draft of the strategy and go in with their own board. But I do think this is one where, weirder things can happen when the board's a little more unpredictable. And I think it is for sure this year.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was reading about is they were thinking like it doesn't get really interesting from like could really get shaken up or things could really start moving until pick 4 with the Sacramento Kings. Because at least from NBA.com's first mock draft, that's when Jaden Ivey would be there. And there was some talk about how the Sacramento Kings obviously wouldn't need him because they already have De'Aaron Fox and Davion Mitchell. So the thought would be like, what do they do? Because they know the Pistons who are right behind them probably want that pick. So do they just take him and then try to trade or take, that player and then try to make it fit again, which would be a similar feeling to what we had with the Kings after last draft, where we're like, what are you guys doing? You just took, I guess the theory was take the best player and make it work. But it definitely felt like at least social media from last year with the Kings was roasting them for that. And it looks like there could be a potential for them to do that again this year in the NBA draft if that's how the things fall.
Yeah, we'll see. Again, there's always intrigue with the Kings just
Yeah.
because, unpredictability, I think, is one thing for sure you can say about the franchise. The Pacers, this is interesting, and this blew my mind. The Pacers picking at 6 is the highest they'll have drafted since 1988, back when they took Rick Smits, number 2
Wow.
overall. Obviously, I know the Pacers have largely been pretty good. You have the Reggie Miller years all through the 90s. They got to the finals. What was that, 2000? They got to the finals, I believe.
Yeah.
They have, the years with Jermaine O'Neal and Ron Artest. And then, of course, the years where they were in the ECF with Paul George. And they've largely always been no worse than a 500 team. But I thought for sure that there'd be one year in there where they'd be at least higher than 6. I mean, and not have a top 5 pick. Like, I get not picking 1, 2, 3. But that really actually surprised me a little bit there. For OKC at 2, again, this is what they've been pushing for a while. They've had all these picks, and here's is finally an opportunity to add another, top young guy to go with the decent core of young players they already have, with Shea Gilgeous-Alexander in the fold and locked up with a contract. You've got Josh Giddey, who obviously looked really good last year, and we're going to talk all rookie team later in the episode. But you start to put the pieces together here a little bit, because that's what you want to see with Oklahoma City.
And there was some talk of, I guess, because they don't have like a huge international prospect this year, but there's an Australian in the G League who is drawing some comparisons to Josh Giddey. So that's kind of fun to watch and see where that goes. I think from what I saw, he was averaging about 11.9 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, and about 5 assists. Dyson Daniels, for anybody that wants to look it up.
I think
So
there were people that I saw were genuinely. It feels like with Detroit that there was, or at least on Twitter, a bit of disappointment. But because I know the Pistons won a lot more games late, and they were pretty competitive after they were,
yeah.
one of, or if not the worst team for a large majority, at least the first half of the season. And I understand the disappointment there, but I would also say you're still picking at 5, and I look at that young core and the steps that they took last year, with Cade Cunningham looking fully like the number 1 overall pick towards the end of the season with superstar potential, with the steps that guys like Sadiq Bey took. I think that like that's the type of development you want. You know what I mean? Like, you can still add a really good player at 5. And to me, it's about those guys developing. Like, if you have a superstar and those guys look like they did at the end of the year last year, you're not going to be near number 1 pick anyway next year. So I that's not the end of the world to me if I'm a Pistons fan.
And I will say at a certain point, there is a benefit for young guys, getting wins and feeling what it is like to have
Yeah.
multiple wins and getting that kind of culture down. I think that's a big part of it too. I saw a lot of people talking about the Orlando Magic and saying like losing breeds losing culture, and it's hard to get out of that. And we have seen Orlando struggle, to get the wins and to turn it around. And I was just looking at it. They're going to have next season pretty much a roster made up, if nothing changes, a roster made up of top 10 picks. I mean, they're going to be really young um, for the most part, which they were last year. But I mean, like, you look at it, whoever they get at number 1, then you got Markel Fultz, Jonathan Isaac, Mo Bamba, Wendell Carter Jr., Suggs. I mean, like, all these guys are within the top 10 of their draft class, which is kind of cool. But also, like, it's like, at some point, you got to make that turn and start making sure you're creating good winning habits.
If Magic fans get the number 1 overall pick and actually Jonathan Isaac comes back healthy and can play basketball,
Be
then
fun.
look out. Like, look
Yeah.
out really fast. I mean, Jonathan Isaac, we know what he can do when he's on the basketball floor, but he just hasn't really been on the basketball floor now. I
Yeah.
mean, the bubble is the last time we saw him. And even before that, in the bubble, he was coming off injury, largely, and rehabbing. And if anything, probably came back a little too fast, and it kind of led to the situation that aggravated it. But no, like you said, I mean, between Cole Anthony, between Franz Wagner, they have a lot of pieces. I mean, even a guy like Wendell Carter Jr., who they got in the Vucevic trade with Chicago, like, he played really well for them last year. He was locked up. He probably has looked the best he has since his rookie year in Chicago. Like I said, they have a lot of pieces, and if they hit on this pick, if that number 1 guy overall, who no matter who it is, like, they could be quite good quite fast. And like I said, Orlando needs it. I mean, they had 2 playoff years where they were an 8 seed with Vooch and all those guys, like with Evan Fournier and Terrence Ross. But this is a franchise that largely hasn't played a ton of significant basketball since Dwight Howard left all the way back in 2012. So, yeah, they're desperate for it. And I think, again, the team bought a lot of goodwill. Like, I mentioned the Pistons. The Magic as well were really competitive towards the end of last year. Like, they weren't winning a lot of these games, obviously. But, they're there. They're young. They're hungry. And I think those habits, like you said, building those habits and identity is important. And then when you add the premier talent into it, that's how you make those steps. That's how you grow. That's how, you try to ideally make a leap, for example, the way the Memphis Grizzlies did, where you end up in the playoff position. And, we're going to talk Grizzlies and some of the other teams that have been eliminated as well. I promise no more Sixers talk. They're not included in that episode. Don't worry. But that'll be at the end. So stay tuned for that. Obviously, we're going to get into the conference finals as well. Welcome, everybody, to the Driving Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rayfuse. Joining me, as always, my co-host, Justin Kuzart.
Luka Aho.
Oh, Lil Wayne, come on. This is crazy. His response was wild because I liked Mark Cuban's response. Like, it was funny. He tweeted the picture of Lil Wayne looking sad courtside in Phoenix in Game 7.
Oh, did he?
And then Lil Wayne deleted it, but he had a response to Mark Cuban. It was aggressive. I'm not gonna, we try to be a family friendly podcast a little bit, so I'm not about to quote that one, but
he just had another one. I don't know if it is in reference to anybody on the basketball court, but he tweeted something 21 hours ago. Maybe it's about Luka. I don't know. We're just left to assume.
Oh, what's the tweet?
It says, "Y'all little bitch, it's up."
Oh yeah, no, that's definitely about Mark Cuban. No, that definitely 100% is that. And what's crazy is, like I said, that's the toned down version. There was a bigger version before that, and it involved we don't need to get into that. But
what's even funnier is in between him calling Luka a hoe and saying what he said about the Mavs. In between that is a tweet about how he's partnering with Popeyes to launch something.
Look, I love Lil Wayne. He's one of the greatest rappers of all time. There's no doubt about that. And look, he's wrong about Luka, man. Luka's many things, and one of them is a soul snatcher because he snatched the Sun's soul, and we're going to talk about that. And of course, preview their series. That's starting tonight. We're recording this Wednesday, May 18th. So Game 1 has already happened with Celtics Heat, so we're going to talk about that and what we expect for the rest of the series. Obviously, talk Western Conference as well, and who's balling, who's fallen, of course. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad, or read them on the podcast. If you're not an Apple user, Google Play Store, Spreaker, TuneIn, Spotify, Amazon Music, anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us.
Yep, and we are still looking for number 36 on YouTube. So if you want to be number 36,
37. Did we drop to 35?
Oh yeah, 37. No, you're right.
Oh,
I'm looking.
Man, we lost one. Woof.
I am reading the number that we have. So yeah, we need number 37. If you want to be number 37, you can obviously just hit us up. Give us a subscribe on YouTube. Just look up Drive and Dish NBA, and we will be right there.
Now, a word from our sponsors.
So the Heat winning Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals, 118-107. I feel like the story for the Celtics, obviously missing Smart and Horford, and I really feel like it can be drilled down to that and just a lot of carelessness with the ball. I feel like those are mainly the 2 points in Game 1, at least.
Yeah, you could have basically. I mean, I agree. You could have even just done full stop after the first one.
Yeah, but I mean, there was a lot of Tatum turnovers. Watching it just seemed like he was really loose and in a bad way. Obviously, like he still put up points, but there were just turnovers that were like, dude, we can't be. Against the Heat, you can't have that. That's like Jimmy Butler's thing.
I thought Jason Tatum, who I thought he played really well overall. I mean, obviously he went nuclear in the first half. I mean, especially the degree of difficulty on a lot of those shots were just outrageous, like where they were completely smothered him. It did feel like he settled a little more in the second half, and to your extent, like kind of with the turnovers, I think that where some of that came from. But Tatum, to me, it was not the reason the Celtics lost that game.
No.
Again, going back to the original pick before Game 1 started, and I tweeted these. Follow me at Refuse to Lose. Follow Justin at Justin C on the air. I had Celtics in 6 and Warriors in 6 were my picks before any of this happened.
Mhm.
To me, obviously, the biggest story from game one, and it's I think the Heat's key adjustment, where obviously, I mean, they really realistically won this game with that obviously massive third quarter. The Celtics made a run and made it briefly entertaining in the fourth quarter, but it was pretty largely, I mean, the Heat completely flipped the game on its head. And I think that's where, I mean, the big adjustment in the second half was just Bam Adebayo waking up, right? It's like when you don't have Al Horford, and I think when they met up in 2020, that was really the story is where because they didn't have Horford then. That was the year he was playing with the Sixers.
Mhm.
Um, they didn't really have like when they met Bam, Robert Williams, who did a great job, I think, coming back from injury, still limited a little bit, but I thought he played really well yesterday. He can do a pretty adequate job, but you got to put a lot of Daniel Tice on Bam as well. Um, that's a matchup that the Heat need to be aggressive with and need to exploit, right? Like when our guy Carlton KB was on the show, a Heat fan a couple weeks ago, he said that's the thing with Bam is he wants Bam to be the guy. Like he wants him to be assertive, especially on the offensive end. Like we know he's this otherworldly defender. And I think we saw that in the third quarter. Like that was the other key too, is like the Heat really just locked in defensively.
Mhm.
And Celtics had a couple too, but it was just ridiculous block after ridiculous block. It felt like, but that was the big second half adjustment. And the Heat just hit a bunch of their shots. Guys like Max Strus and Gabe Vincent came alive. I thought Vincent had a really good game. And then obviously Jimmy just continued to do what Jimmy's been doing. I mean, these entire playoffs, like you can make a pretty compelling case that Jimmy Butler's been the best player. Another 40-point game. He closed out that series, basically just closed the coffin on the Sixers. And, this wasn't, to me, once Horford and Smart were out, this felt like a game that Miami had to win. Boston, you can just go back to it at the end of the day and say, hey, we didn't have two of our best guys. Like at the end, we hung for a little bit. We got a really bad third quarter, and we can still go in here in game two. If we steal that, we're going back to Boston, where then we have home court advantage. Boston, we just came back from game 6 and game 7 against the defending champion Milwaukee Bucks. Like, I don't think this is a team that can handle adversity. Like, I don't worry about their mental after game 1. Now, Marcus Smart, according to the injury reports today, is going to be playing in game 2.
Yeah.
So obviously that's massive. I thought Grant Williams did fine. It's just that once he got into foul trouble, the perimeter defense just wasn't there the way it is during the regular season. Obviously, once you get Defensive Player of the Year Marcus Smart back, that will improve pretty quickly. I think it'll help them in terms of a playmaker too. It looks like they're not going to have Horford for game 2. Maybe we'll get him back game 3. That to me is the bigger loss. And in that third quarter, like that's where I thought they missed Smart and Horford last night. They needed that guy to kind of stable them out. Obviously, Al is the vet for them. But again, all that goes back to say the Heat needed to win that game, and they did. I give Tyler Hero a lot of credit in the first half when that game could have got out of hand, especially the way that Tatum was playing. I thought he did a really, really good job just getting to his spots, attacking, hitting with the floater. Like there was a point where even Jimmy Butler wasn't hitting a ton of buckets. Like Tyler Hero kind of kept them afloat, kept them in the ball game. I remember them going into halftime only down single digits when they were down for double digits for large portions of the first and early second. I thought that was a victory there. And then obviously we saw it in the second half. And I think that's, again, where the Celtics, just not having two of their top guys kind of showed. Like Miami is the better team if Al Horford and Marcus Smart are not playing. Now, I think for Boston, again, though, you still got to feel good about everything all considered. You're going to have to, again, if you can stop the other guys, like Jimmy is just getting his right now, these playoffs. Like, and at this point, I'd try to stop the other guys. If I had my biggest concern, if I have one for the Celtics right now, besides just waiting for Horford to come back, is Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown just looked all out of sorts last night. Like you mentioned, just not just the turnovers with Jaylen Brown, but it just felt like his possessions were out of control at some times. He wasn't really getting to his spots. Like he was pretty careless overall. Just 10 points on the night. And so, yeah, I really feel like they need a lot more out of Jaylen Brown. Like he's got to snap out of this funk. He's missing free throws left and right yesterday, even when he was able to get to the line. Again, you hope that he can be better, and I think he will be better. But that's a burn the tape type game for Jaylen Brown for me.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to me is that third quarter, you drill it down to them only having 14 points in that quarter, and
Mhm.
I think it was 2 made field goals the entire quarter. Like all of the rest of the points came off free throws. So like, you know, again, I think you take that with a grain of salt. You look at the 3-pointers, they attempted 7 and made 0. You would imagine that that kind of levels out a little bit more, and some of
Yeah.
those do go for them. You know, that is just a cold spell. So I think, you know, you look at that, you see how unsatisfied you feel with how you performed if you're the Celtics, and you look at it and you're like, well, we only lost by 11. And we get
Yeah.
Marcus Smart back. That could be the little bit of swing that they need, the little bit of pump that they need, and you can easily write a script where I would believe that they could win game 2 and go from there, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, give Miami credit too. They've been really good at home. I mean, they haven't lost yet these playoffs. Boston going into last night's game has had the best road record in the playoffs. Obviously, in terms of that score, it's 1-0 Miami right now. But like you said, for Boston, even if you go down 0-2, like we just saw Miami against the Sixers surrender an 0-2 lead. I could very like game 3 becomes a must win if you're Boston and you go down 0-2. But even at that point, like I'm still far from panic mode, especially if I don't have Al Horford and I know that I'm getting him back in front of in a raucous TD Garden. I'm not worried about this. Again, their mentality has been sharp all year. Super impressive to go
See,
into
I think
Milwaukee and win that game 6. I mean, and force that game 7 where, what do we say? At least in one case, it's skewed towards the home team in game 7. But I'm not worried about Boston here. Both of these teams are tough defensively. Like we knew what type of series this was going to be. Getting Marcus Smart back will be massive. And look, if Miami goes up 2-0, again, I'm not worried about Boston's mentality. They have to win game 3. They go down 3-0,
well,
it's over.
that's what I would say. Like game 2, you lose
You don't want to
game
tread the
2.
line. That's the biggest thing.
Right.
You don't want to toe the line.
If you lose game 2, when is it? Tomorrow. You lose game 2 tomorrow, I'm going to be a little more worried than I am
What
right now.
what are you on a 1-10 if you're a Boston fan and if you're a Celtics guy and you're down 0-2?
Down 0-2, I'm probably at like a 6.
Okay.
I'm
That's
probably
where
at a 6.
I'm gonna
Maybe
stop.
maybe
Yeah.
close to a 7, but like it because, you know, because that really does feel like you going into that game 3 is like you cannot lose that. So losing game 2 wouldn't be great. You know, like don't even put yourself in that situation, I guess is why I'm feeling that way.
No, I think if Boston comes out and steals game 2, like they could flip this series again
Yeah.
really quickly. Like that's the thing. Kyle Lowry's still not playing. Already ruled out of game 2, nursing the hamstring injury. I got to be honest. I don't know that we'll see Kyle Lowry the rest of the playoffs. Hamstring injuries, we know what they do. They linger for a long time. He also just was pretty bad against the Sixers. Like even when he was on the floor and able to go, he didn't remotely look like Kyle Lowry of the past, the Kyle Lowry that we're used to. Maybe he can come in and give them rolls off the bench, but at this point, I would stick with Gabe Vincent. Like it seems to be working in that regard anyway. I believe they're undefeated with Gabe Vincent in the lineup once he starts. So I think you keep rolling with it while it's working. If you're able to get Lowry back for limited minutes, so be it. But again, I think that's also where Oladipo helps out too, right? Like factoring him into that rotation, into the equation, that kind of helps offset that loss a little bit. But yeah, for me, once Horford and Smart were out, Miami, that felt like a must-win game for Miami. So the fact that they were able to do that and avoid, the kind of the trap, if you will, I think that was huge for them here going into game 2. Again, give Spo a lot of credit in the adjustments he made there in the second half. I thought they took care of their business. Going out west now, so this is in progress. End of the first quarter, the Warriors are up 28-18 against Dallas. Again, I had Warriors in 6 in this series. I mean, Luka is just on another planet. Like, I mean, you want to talk about the emergence, like the fact that he's got a real chance here to go to the finals in his 3rd season. Obviously, they have a monumental task in taking out the fully healthy Warriors, a team that we know has done this plenty of times before, has played in as much meaningful basketball together as anybody. But I mean, Dallas, give them so much credit just defensively and the job that they've done on that front. And give Jason Kidd a lot of credit, man. I can't say it enough. The tapes of at least with me, I feel like my Jason Kidd takes about that higher. You might as well just freezing cold take them all. I mean, I was
Throw them all on
actively
there.
calling it a bad hire. I said it was just laughable almost. It was going to hurt Luka's development. He's done a really good job in this go around now. has kind of worked on some of the issues that he had in the previous stints in Milwaukee and in Brooklyn. And he deserves a lot of credit for turning this team's defensive identity around, for ratcheting up the
Well,
intensity.
and
And
I
it
would
just helps that
say,
Luka is just a megastar. Like, he is that good. He can
yeah.
carry you.
But and I will say too, from a coaching standpoint, what he did against the Suns, and I know we're going to talk Suns later, but making Chris Paul's life absolutely miserable, like
Yep.
100% of the time, you're running him through picks, you're like everything you were doing. That was very impressive. And obviously it worked, and they are now going up against the Warriors. Although I'll say, as of right now, they're shooting 15% from three, which I'm sure will be a talker down the line. They're 3 for 19. Like I said, or like you said, games in progress.
Yeah,
Um,
Luka's got 8, 3
would
for 8 in the
you
field right now. Wiggins leading the way for the Warriors. He's got 10. Kevon Looney's got 6, 3 for 3 at the field.
would you s-
Uh-oh.
no, 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 no. Well, I
I
was
know
gonna
that
say
sigh.
no, 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 because I'm trying to think. Like, if you were, would you rather have? Well, okay, I'll just say it. Would you rather have Luca or Steph?
Long term or right now?
I guess, what's your answer for both of those?
I mean, long term, it's Luka. It's not even
Sure.
close. I mean, there aren't many players. I mean, Giannis is probably the only one that I'd long term take over Luka at this point.
Okay.
I would take Luka long term over Kevin Durant. I would take him over Steph long term. I would take him over Kawhi, Jokic, Embiid. I mean, Tatum's in the ballpark of close.
Sure.
And I mean, so are Jokic and Embiid, obviously, but they're a little bit older. Like, Luka's age is the big factor there too. Um, but the fact that it's arguable, like, that's a really like valid discussion, and I think that speaks to how good Luka has been and how scary this should be for the rest of the league. Like, no, he's reaching the peak of his powers, and he's not even close to his prime yet. Like, they're in the
Right.
conference finals already. They just dusted a 64 win Phoenix Suns team, who was quite literally the best team in the NBA the entire regular season. I mean, the supporting cast has been great too. Like, that was the big question, is who is going to step up. We talked about
Well,
Jalen Brunson, who's made himself a ton of money. Dinwiddie, who has been kind of bad in the playoffs, like great post deadline, kind of off in the playoffs, phenomenal in that game 7. Like, that stepped up absolutely when they needed to. But I mean, a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith has really stepped up and emerged a little bit here in these playoffs. Like, Reggie Bullock has been solid for them. Like, you got to give the supporting cast credit too. But man, Luka is just putting on these boys right now, like across the league. It doesn't matter. Like, he's getting his, and he looks like that guy. Like, he looks like he could be best player in the league type caliber here a lot sooner than later at this point.
well, no, and the reason I was bringing that up is I feel like if you're going like after Luca and Steph, the next, would you say 2 or 3 best players on the court are on the Warriors?
I would say for sure too. That I think it's Luka and Steph, and then Clay and Dre, and then it's kind of up for grabs. Like, at that
Sure.
point, you've got, at that point, you got Jalen Brunson, you've got
Yeah.
Wiggins, you've got Dinwiddie. Um, I would put Brunson probably over
What about
Wiggins
wait,
at this point.
okay.
Jordan Poole too. I
Yeah,
forgot
that's
Jordan
what I
Poole
was
in
gonna
the
say.
mix. Yeah,
Poole.
Jordan Poole's in that mix too. I really like Golden State's rotation, like that they've kind of settled themselves into here with Dre, with Wiggins, with Kevon Looney, Steph, Klay Thompson, and then Jordan Poole and Otto Porter coming off the bench. I like Kuminga playing minutes if he needs to. But that's to me, that's the winning rotation. I just think it fits really well. It's the best defensive lineup that they can put out there. I think the Warriors are going to handle their business. I think they win this series in 6. I do just think they're the better team right now. For all the things I've said about Dallas, like, I do think this is a situation where experience pays off, where, again, just the Warriors supporting cast it's way better right now than Dallas's is. Maybe in another world, if Tim Hardaway Jr. is playing, that swings it a little bit. And I do look, Dallas is going to be competitive in these games. I'm not suggesting that this is going to be like a 4 or 5 game massacre. Like, I do think this will go 6. I can see like, Luka's too good to get swept. You know what I mean? Like, I think for
Okay.
sure he'll steal one of these games. The Warriors
Hopefully,
have an
yeah.
off shooting night. Like, look, the Warriors lost a game to the Grizzlies when they didn't have Ja. They lost another game, obviously, to the Grizzlies. Like that series went 6, so they lost a game
Well,
to the
they've
Nuggets
shown
without most of their guys. So
they've shown they're vulnerable. Like the Warriors have shown that, you know. But the other thing to remember is we saw what maybe 10, 11 games of the main three healthy and playing together this season. Like we
yeah,
really haven't seen this team actually play. I mean, we've got it in the playoffs now, but
that's what I
they
mean. We
might
did. We did at the end of the regular season. They look great, and that's why
right,
they're
right.
probably. I mean, I don't know. That's the we talk about the parity in the draft at the beginning of the show. Let's talk about the parity with the Final Four right now. I mean, this is the first time in a while where it does. It feels like it's wide open. You could make compelling arguments for all four of these teams to win the finals right now. I'm a little higher on Boston, and you know me, I hate saying that sentence, but I think Boston is probably the best team left, a little bit over Golden State, a tiny, tiny bit over
Okay,
Golden State,
okay.
but I could for sure see Miami and Dallas both winning the title.
So your tier, if you were going to tier the four out, would be Boston, Warriors, Heat, Mavs.
Yeah, I think so for sure.
I don't know why, but that feels disrespectful to the Heat to me.
I think it feels disrespectful to the Mavs. I'm the exact opposite. I think
Well, no, because the Mavs are like. Don't get me wrong, like
Mavs
the
got
Mavs.
Luka.
Don't get me wrong, I get it, but at the end of the day,
He'd have Jimmy too.
yeah, you can look at almost every single team other than the Mavs right now, and you can point to two stars, give or take, and the Mavs don't have that, right?
So I think if you put Luka on the floor in any series left, he against other than maybe the Warriors, even over Jimmy, even over Tatum, I think he's the best player on the
Okay,
floor. And so to that point, in what could be the most individual sport of all the professional sports, there that is enough of a difference potentially. Now, to that token, I think against with those other three teams, like who are the Celtics' three best players? Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown, and then either Marcus Smart or Al Horford. Pick your
yeah,
poison.
depending on
Um,
who's playing and if they're healthy, yeah,
right. Either way, like I would argue all three of those guys are probably better than Dallas's number two.
right.
With Miami, I feel that way with
Jimmy
Jimmy
and
and
Bam,
Bam.
Tyler.
I would even, yeah, I would argue Tyler Hero as well. With
I don't even think Tyler's a debate. Like he's
No, I
been
think it's a debate with how Brunson's been playing, but I would still take
that's fair.
I would take Tyler Hero, don't get me wrong, but I think it's a debate with how well Brunson's been playing these playoffs. Um, and then with Golden State, obviously, like we said, I would take
Steph,
Steph, I
Clay,
would take
Dre.
Clay, and I would say Dre over after Luca. But we'll see what happens. I do think the Warriors are going to get there.
And that's
Um,
why I think there should, and I don't like they are giving Luca the credit, but I think that's why like it needs to be pointed out how crazy impressive this is. Like Luca beating the Suns, the Mavs beating the Suns, I should say, and Luca being the main guy for that. Like the Suns had the same situation: CP3, Aiton, and Booker. You know what I mean? Like they and probably you could probably go a little further down the list with them as well, and still say the Suns had more guys after Luca. You know?
yeah, no, 100%. This is this is extremely impressive. And I mean, Dallas has had a great second half of the season, but I did not think that they were going to get to the conference finals. Like I thought they had a great matchup in Utah for the first
Yeah,
round. And even give them credit for winning games. Like maybe that should have been a sign for more of us here where we said, hey, it's like I know Utah was falling apart, but Dallas didn't have Luka for those first two games, and they were for sure hanging afloat and staying afloat. Um, the depth is better, I think, than we gave it credit for. And
yeah.
just again, defense wins in the playoffs. And I think that's another situation where we're
And
seeing that a little bit here. So
the just I'm the best mentality. You know what I mean? Out of Luca, like we saw it. Like
yeah,
nothing was phasing him. Like he
no,
wasn't getting rattled and
he
it wasn't
laughs
going to get
after
to him.
every basket. Like he was cooking these guys and laughing the whole time. Like he's a guy who loves playing basketball. He has fun with it. It's just wild because he is like you see Luca go in the gym and it's just you're like, how does this kind of
Yeah.
like goofy looking Slovenian just cook all these guys? Like he's not an elite athlete, he's not an elite shooter, but he just gets to his
And
spots
there's
better than anybody.
all over NBA Reddit right now. There's a picture of him like hanging out it looks like he is drinking a beer. Like, and I don't know when the photo was
Oh,
taken, but
they said it's old now. They said
yeah.
that was an old photo. So
But they were kind of saying they're like that you don't see any other NBA player doing this, and I'm like, well, they just don't
Luka
get
can do
photographed.
whatever he wants if he's winning,
It
man. I
looked like
mean,
he was
this
with
guy
Boban, honestly.
no, he was.
Yeah.
In the 4 wins against Phoenix, Luka had 26, 13, and 9. He had 26, 11, and 7, and he had 33, 11, and 8, and then 35, 10, and 4 in the final game. Obviously, played 5 less minutes in the last game with it being a blowout like that. But I
Hmm.
mean, that's the thing, and it was a crazy end of that series, obviously, with the fact because I mean, Phoenix blew the doors off the Mavericks in Game 5. That's why Game 6 was so alarming. Like, or Game 7 was so alarming. Like Dallas was in a situation where they had won both their games at home. Like them winning a Game 6 on their home floor, maybe isn't the most stunning thing in the world, but what do we say all the time on last pod? Game 7's more often than not skewed towards the home team. I mean, that was just an utter shellacking in Phoenix. We'll get into that here in a little bit, but parity is definitely the name of the
It
game in the conference finals right now for
it
sure, and I think that's unique to the NBA.
it didn't help my situation when my wife was trying to watch hockey, and I'm like, no, we have to watch basketball, and then we switch over and they're down 30, and I'm like, all right, you can put hockey on.
Well, you
Like, what
got
do you want?
Rangers Canes now too. I mean, the Rangers
I
look dead.
know.
We talked about that. Then they had a 3-1 comeback against the Penguins, which is always beautiful to see. Like, I never want the Rangers to prosper either. Don't get me wrong, but like, I will root for anyone that plays
we
the
are
Penguins.
we are eyeing a game 5 playoff appearance for myself and Nicole, if the Rangers and Canes get there. We're trying to make a trip up to Raleigh. It'll
I
be
think
one
it'd
of
be
those
good.
last
I don't
second
think
things.
I would be stunned if one of those teams gets swept. Like, they're
The
both
thing
too
with
good to get
the thing
swept.
with hockey, the thing with hockey that I've noticed is like what it's the opposite of what you were just saying, where like NBA with the parody, like you can follow the story and you can kind of see when the momentum's swinging and changing, and you have that a little bit in hockey, but with hockey is like a lot of times you can take anything you learn from the previous game and just throw it out the window because it
Oh,
means
100%.
absolutely nothing.
Yeah, no, I agree with that for sure. Like, hockey also has the element too where it's like you can have basketball games where shooters get
Right.
going and just are fluky, but you know, hockey literally a goalie can steal you a game
Yeah.
essentially. Where I mean, look at
And
that
lose
Dallas
a game
Calgary
and
game
lose you
7.
a game.
Yeah, Ottinger had 60 some saves and they ended up losing that game because Calgary just kept putting it on net. But it's like that's a game where Calgary should have won that game by 4 goals, basically. And it just
Mhm.
didn't happen because of a goalie. Like, realistically in basketball, like the better team wins. Like, 8-1 upsets have happened in hoops, obviously, but not like hockey. Like major
Right.
comebacks, like 3-1s come happen in hockey all the time. I mean, more 3-0s have happened in hockey than any other sport. I mean, we've had 2 at least in the last, I guess it is more than a decade now, but in the last 15
Oof.
years. Like the Flyers came back 3-0 from against the Bruins in 2010.
You wanna
And the Kings did against the Sharks. I forget what year that was, but they did that. They were down. The Sharks are up 3-0
I
and the
kinda
Kings came
remember that.
back.
You just said something that made me think you were talking about how it has been more than a decade. This is way off topic, but it's gonna make anybody listening feel old. The movie Shrek turned 21 today.
Oh, I believe that. I mean,
21 though.
I for sure feel
That movie can legally drink alcohol now.
no, I can't.
Like
That's crazy. But I remember getting that. Like, I remember getting Shrek when we first got a DVD player, and I think about how long
Yeah.
ago that was,
Wow.
and so
Was
I
it
do kind
green?
of.
Was it, like, green?
It should have been. It
It
wasn't.
should have been
No,
if it
it
was.
should have been though for sure. Shrek is great, man. It's aged well. It's really, really good. I saw it. I had the Welcome to Duloc song stuck in my head the other day.
Well,
Because
it is,
my girlfriend just randomly was humming it, and it
oh,
just was
you know
stuck in
what?
my head all
Hold
night
on.
long.
You might wanna check your girlfriend's phone. She might have a TikTok because it is trending on TikTok.
Wait, is it really?
And dead serious, yeah. No lie. Actually, really weird plug for my TikTok. I did a I did a breakdown of what a radio station would sound like in Duloc. Like, I made sweepers and and traffic breaks.
I'm actually gonna go watch this later. Make sure you follow
I
Justin his Top Shot profile as well
Yes.
if you're into that. Squeaky 9000.
Mhm.
We'll have another one come in this weekend at some point. we had another one about a week and a half ago now. So if you want to go back and watch that, it's on YouTube. That's still one of my favorite Top Shot moment, without a doubt, is still the Marvin Bagley thing. But we'll talk about that more on
Dude,
the next Pack Rip episode.
I'm itching. Like, we have a pack that I haven't opened yet. It's from the playoffs. It's from this playoffs, and
Oh, all
I'm
right, I'm
itching.
excited.
But we have to wait till Saturday because they're doing another drop. So I'm going to try to get another one. So at least our drop or pack rip can be 2 packs instead of 1, and we can have more fun with it. And honestly, if I can get a second pack out of the, or I guess it would technically be a third pack out of the next one, I'm going to do it. So we're going to try to get it, and then we'll record sometime, over the weekend or early next week for that drop.
Yeah, either way, stay tuned for that. All right, who's balling, who's falling? Our NBA version of the stock market. We always like to start with the good before the bad. And so balling for me this week are the NBA all rookie teams, which were released. First team, Scotty Barnes, who obviously won Rookie of the Year, Evan Mobley, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, and Franz Wagner. The second team, Ayo Dosunmu, Chris Duarte, Josh Giddey, Bones Highland, and Herb Jones. Any objections? Anybody you feel like got snubbed? Any grievances?
I don't think so. Honestly, I'm pulling it up so I can look at it on paper, but I don't feel like there's anybody that they're missing, but I feel like somebody that, like, I feel like there might be somebody that someone's thinking of and be like, wow, how haven't they thought about it,
So I think that the top 10 is fine. I don't think there's any real snubs there. I think they got the guys right.
Yeah,
I think Jalen Green is a lot of recency bias. I feel like Josh Giddey should
sure.
have been there. I just think, like, again, he was
Yeah.
great after the All-Star game. Like, he was averaging over 22 points, but he did hit a really high usage rate. It feels like he was just kind of getting force-fed stats. And it didn't really make up. Again, it's for the whole year. Like, I think Jalen Green should have been on the second team. I'm not suggesting like he shouldn't have been here, but even Herb Jones, like, I think had a pretty good argument to be first team. But I think those two, with Giddey and Herb Jones, I think they probably should have been over Jalen Green. That would be my beef if I have one. Scotty, Evan Mobley, Cade Cunningham were locks. Franz Wagner should have been a lock.
Yeah,
I like all the second team guys. Like, everybody else, I'm fine with.
The problem I always have with it, right, is like you could point out guys that did receive votes that aren't on the list, with Kuminga and Suggs and Davion Mitchell. Like, those guys, like, you can say that. But my problem with it is, and I could just list them off right now for you to say all these guys should get it. But the problem is, like, who are you going to be replacing?
Right. And I don't think there's anybody there that is really worthy that should be kicked out. Like, I think truly, I think the top 10 is right completely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's fair. So, I'm sure we'll hear from somebody if we're forgetting someone.
Well, and if it's a potential bet, like, here's the thing, like, because it goes back to the Rookie of the Year thing, right? Like, I think Cade Cunningham has a much higher ceiling than Scotty Barnes does still. But I still think, but you could argue that Scotty Barnes deserved the Rookie of the Year over Cade Cunningham. I think Jonathan Kuminga has a higher ceiling than some of the guys on this list, but he's not there yet. Like, this is a 2021, 2022 award. Like, we're not talking about the all-time projections here.
Let me ask you this. Do you think Suggs would have got it if he could have stayed healthy and not injured?
Maybe. I mean, if he had played, yeah, I agree. He would have had to play more of the year.
Yeah, he missed a good chunk.
A little bit shooting the ball early on. Like, that's the thing. So his defense was solid. But the defense isn't really the way that gets you on these award teams. You know what I mean? He also got overshadowed by Franz a little bit. But yeah, I mean, he had the tools and the potential to be there for sure. And he would have got heavy minutes just based on obviously where Orlando is right now.
Yeah, so I kind of agree. My balling's going to go out to Danny Green and Pat Bev, who are just now beefing, apparently. Danny Green went on a podcast and talked all about how nobody is worried about Patrick Beverley. People game plan specifically to go at him. To sum it up, if you want to listen to it, you can find it anywhere. It's on the internet. But Pat responded by posting a stat of this season's lowest field goal percentage allowed. He is number 2 on that list, just behind Giannis. So that was his rebuttal.
So, like always, I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle with the Pat Bev media tour, because this man got up and just started slandering Chris Paul left and right.
He did.
It was all over every ESPN talk show. Like, he was ready, and it was his time to shine. obviously this is on brand with who Patrick Beverley is. He's very
Yeah.
brash. He's tough. You know, some call it passion, some call it ridiculous and annoying. Like that's his brand of basketball. This is who he is. And I think, you know, in a way you know, he's angling for that post career as well. Characters like Pat Bev always do well in the media. And I think a lot of what he says is legit. Like, I don't think Patrick Beverly, obviously, like, he has some juice with what he says for sure. Like, we gave him a lot of credit in kind of changing the culture a little bit in Minnesota this year. He's been in the playoffs every single year. I also just don't believe that, you know, there's always that argument from superstars, right? Where they get the whole, well, you have to be as good as they are to criticize them. And so it's like, what? So 20 people on earth can criticize
Yeah,
Chris Paul who
I
are at
agree.
that level of NBA like godliness. But so in that way, I think that's a little lame, but it was personal and kind of like going far. And that's what Patrick Beverly does. So I'm not really mad at players that want to check him either and be like, yo, Pat, you're a role player. Like, Chris Paul is one of the best NBA players of all time. Like, you can say, sure, he's come up short in the playoffs, but it's like Pat Bev is also not carrying a team to the playoffs either. And oh, by the way, Pat Bev's team just blew 4 double-digit leads in the first round to get eliminated. So it's like, sure, you can dump on the Suns like everybody else is right now, but you know, yeah, you can clap back a little bit too and be like, yo, Pat Bev, like, what are you talking about right now?
Yeah. I completely agree, and it's one of those things not to diminish Patrick Beverley's role that he plays because he does it well, and him, you know, PJ Tucker, like those kind of guys.
No, you
Honestly,
need them.
well, that's what I mean is like I like not to talk about the Sixers, but I feel like that was a huge thing that the Sixers were lacking. A guy like that.
I
I
thought
know
Danny
Embiid.
Green was one of the few guys who did play that role.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
unfortunately, like I got to be honest, I thought when at first I heard Danny Green, I was like, oh, how can he be balling this week? I was like, dude, man's tore his ACL,
yeah.
like,
I know.
and that's what stinks. I mean, I feel obviously he's going to probably because of where it was in Game 6, like he didn't really. You know, Danny Green was great in games 3 and 4, just shot the lights out at Wells Fargo. He's kind of off in game 5, but yeah, just pretty early. I mean, he played 3 minutes in
Yeah.
game 6 before the injury. Obviously, probably going to miss a year here minimum. And Danny Green's 35 years old. Like, I do think that there's a chance that this could be it. I mean, obviously, Danny Green can shoot the basketball, and with his, you know, with his experience, this is a guy who's won 3 titles with 3 different franchises: Toronto, San Antonio, and the Lakers. Even on teams where he hasn't won the title, like with the Sixers, I thought he's done a really great job since
Mhm.
coming over, both in the locker room, off the court, what they need him to do on the floor as well. So obviously, like, we hope this isn't it. But if it is, salute to Danny Green. You know, hopefully he gets back soon and, you know, he can end his career on the way he should. Because I mean, he's been, you know, Danny Green's again, not one of these players who's ever going to be a Hall of Famer, but he's the guy who understood his role and he played it well and was a guy that you could win meaningful basketball games with.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you, and that's why you hope he can make it back and contribute, and you know you just hope he listens to his body, and maybe I'm a little more sensitive to that now because of the Tariq Cohen video that was going around. I know
Oh,
that's
that's
NFL,
horrible. Yeah, that's
but that
so
was
sad.
tough. Yeah, that was tough to watch and hear. So, um, you know, that's the other side of it too. Is don't do anything that's going to be like just lasting harm to the body.
No, for sure, 100%. I mean, he has nothing to prove either.
Right.
All right, falling for me this week is Lonzo Ball. Report from David Kaplan in ESPN 1000 in Chicago, AM 1000 in Chicago, that the Bulls have concerns about Lonzo Ball's knee.
Mm.
He had surgery back in January. Obviously, never played the rest of the year. Looked like he could be back, in the playoffs like early on. Obviously, never ended up playing any playoff minutes for the Bulls this year. This is a guy that they've locked into a contract, a guy that has been really, really good when he's been on the floor. But unfortunately, Lonzo Ball has missed a lot of time over his career. Again, he to me has taken tangible steps every season he's been in the league, including when he put the Chicago uniform on in the beginning. You know, when Chicago was off to that hot start this year, Lonzo Ball was a big part of that. He's a guy who is a factor on both ends of the floor. He's a great passer. He's a great defender. Has improved his shot. So, you know, when he's a definitive good player when he's healthy, you hope that again he can get back here and get healthy. That's the most important thing for Lonzo Ball right now. And you hope that these are just concerns and that it doesn't play out into something more real here.
Well, yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it's one of those things where like you were saying, we've seen improvement, what it feels like every single year. And you would hate to see something like that, you know, make a team move on, or end or hinder a dude's career. But like you were pointing to is I hope they do take a chance. I hope they let him grow, and I hope that Lonzo has a chance to actually prove wrong and have himself a healthy season. I
Yeah.
mean, like, but like you were saying, I mean, we had, I guess, his most games played, and I know people point to the COVID season and stuff like that, so things were shorter, but most would be 63 in 2019, 2020.
Yeah.
But after that, I mean, before that was barely over 50. And since then, I mean, last season 35 and the season before that at 55. So, um, you hope that he can get healthy and get better too. It's just one of those things.
Yeah. No doubt about it. Injuries are the worst part of the game. All right. Who's
Yep.
falling for you this week?
I actually have two. I told you I had one, and it was actually because NBA.com accidentally published their their first team rookie story early by accident, and so they tried to delete it. But the problem was, in a Google search, if you looked up Cade Cunningham, the article that pretty much said Cade Cunningham named to NBA All Rookie Team was there. But if you clicked on the link, it was a blank page and there was no name, but the URL said Cade Cunningham named to offers. So some intern somewhere is getting fired and going to get in a lot of
Oh,
trouble.
I hate that, man. Don't
You
root
know
for
it's true,
if
though.
it's not an intern, it could first off, no one is just randomly publishing things to NBA.com as an intern. You know this. You're
You
in the
never know.
industry.
Dude, come
Actually, I don't
on.
know anymore. Actually, you're right. We may never know anymore.
Listen,
But
listen. I have a list. This is gonna sound so pretentious, but I have a list of people that I'm supposed to email stuff that I want published to our website. When I want it published, I just send them and say, "Hey, put this story on our site. I need this. I need this."
well, yeah, it's what digital teams are for.
And the digital teams are not in our city, and they are younger, probably very not great paid people.
Sounds like a podcast that we should talk about one day. We could do a
We can do a whole thing. So-
one on that. But I'm rooting for whoever did that to not get fired.
So to steer away from that conversation and potentially get us in trouble with our company, I am going to give my second fallen, which actually is going out to Jazz fans and maybe just writers in general. This is a very common thing that I see happen when a smaller market team gets the number one pick.
Uh-oh.
Everyone tries to, I'm gonna say dump, but dump is not the word, and I'm not diminishing the player because I know Donovan Mitchell is a great player. But immediately, I mean, seconds after the announcement, there was talks about, wow, the Jazz should try to trade Donovan for the number one pick and just move on from there. It's like, well, you're acting like the Orlando Magic don't have a plan and don't have a thought and have a vision for the team. I understand that a trade like that could potentially be in the play and be worth it, but it happens a lot with smaller market teams where people are just immediately like, oh, let's trade him Harden, like let's just give him Harden.
So I don't think, because in a way I agree with you, because I think it's really a disservice to smaller markets when teams try to trade their guys right away, essentially. It's felt that way with Zion. It's certainly felt that way with Donovan Mitchell at times. So I think with Utah, obviously, it's a little more tangible now, given how the playoffs ended, how the season ended. It does feel like that team has hit its core and that they have to make a move there. I am going to put you on the spot and flip this to you. Obviously, I think there's 0% chance of this happening, but would you trade number one for Donovan Mitchell?
I saw, I was actually talking with Chase, and possibly somebody Chase knows, but the URL was not a name that I could pick up on. And they said that it would take more than the first for Donovan. Which kind of I was surprised that they said that.
I think it's a first and like a decent young player, but I don't think it's much more than that. Maybe another first rounder, but it's not going to be more than that. If you're giving number one up, like I know
that's what I said. That's number one.
It isn't like that. It's not that home run draft, but It's still number one overall. Like, you don't
You
teams
follow
it's very rare that number ones get moved, put it that way.
you follow okay, let me give him the correct shout out because you follow this guy. Andy is Magic Minute.
Oh, I love Andy Jordan,
Okay.
man. That's my guy. Andy's gonna come on the podcast one of these days. Like,
Okay.
he
We
is
should ask him about this.
no,
We need
shout
to
out
get
to
him
my
on.
guy, and Andy is well overdue to come on the show. This is me publicly calling him out, but he'll be on here sooner than later. No,
Well,
Andy's my guy.
so him and Chase were talking because I tweeted that I was excited that they got it and Chase hit me back and so we were going back and forth and I said, I know Chase, you as an Orlando Magic fan are excited for this. Do you put anything behind the potential of them that these chatters, these Twitter tweets, yeah, that made me sound so old. These tweets about potentially Donovan in the first round, and Andy said personally, no, I like Mitchell, but I wouldn't trade the number one for him. Plus, it would take much more than the one pick. I don't think it would.
Define much more.
Well, I guess we'd have to find out, but I don't think it would take much more, especially if you're the Jazz and you've decided you have to move on. If you can get the number one pick of this draft coming up, and you want to go with you want to go with a ball handler or a point guard, like go do it.
Let the record show, I think there's a 0% chance of any of this happening.
Yeah,
Like, I think there is a less than zero. Now, Donovan Mitchell getting moved, different story. Donovan Mitchell getting moved for the number one overall pick to Orlando, pretty much a 0% at this point.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense for the Orlando Magic in my mind, really. Like what you're building is fine, and I don't think you need a ball handler.
Yeah, we'll have a whole summer to figure out whether they're going to move Donovan Mitchell or Rudy Gobert because, I mean, that's one of, if not the biggest, probably narrative of the summer. But I guess that kind of transitions into the teams that also have to figure out their narratives this summer. Last episode, we talked about the Sixers getting eliminated. So if you want to hear Justin and I be sad, go back and listen to that. Since then, of course, 3 other teams have been eliminated: the Bucks, the Suns, and the Grizzlies. I think one of these things is clearly not like the other. So I think we have to start with Phoenix, especially just given the way it went down, the absolute shellacking in Game 7 against Dallas on their home floor, where, like, you said earlier in the podcast, Chris Paul pretty much completely ineffective. DeAndre Ayton wasn't even playing in the fourth quarter. Devin Booker wasn't great. And I mean, look, I think, again, what was the comparison we always made? The comparison we always made was, can this team be the 2014 San Antonio Spurs? Like, they got close to the playoffs, or they got close to winning a title last year. They won 2 games. They were up 2-0, obviously lost to Milwaukee. They won a franchise record 64 games. It's like, here you go. You're right back at it. Can that carry over? And, I don't want to say that they looked off the whole playoffs, because they did beat New Orleans in 5, but a lot of those games were pretty close. So I do think there's something to be said about that. And then certainly against Dallas, I mean, they started the series up 2-0, but I don't know. I guess I'm stunned because of the way they reacted in Game 5, right? Like, you get shell-shocked, or not shell-shocked, but you lose 2 games in Dallas, you give your 2-0 lead away. To go in and win Game 5 by 30 points on your home floor, like, you got to feel pretty good. And then you come back and just, losing Game 6 in Dallas is one thing. Even if it's a bad loss, that is an unsettling, like, redefining everything that we've done here loss if you're Phoenix in Game 7. Chris Paul is not going to retire. He said that in his press conference afterwards. Obviously, Booker is locked in. Mikal Bridges is locked in. But, I mean, you got to look at it with Chris Paul. I mean, even in their win in Game 5, like, Chris Paul had 7 and 10. In Game 4, he had 5 and 7. He had 12 and 4 the game before that. He had 13 and 4 in Game 6.
Well,
he had 10 and 4 in Game 7. Like, it was a drastic, radical fall off from Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton too, who we'll get into here in a little bit. But,
and Booker
too. No, for sure. But it was concerning.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like the entire team, a team that had really, I mean, well, obviously the best record in the league, but one of the better teams in general, the better rosters, the better depth. Like, it just collapsed, and it started at the top with your top 3 guys. I mean,
Yeah,
like you said, Booker still put up 19, 11 points in the last 2 games, but he didn't hit a 3. He was 0 for 4 in both games.
it was inefficient.
He shot 6 for 17 in that would have been game 6. He was 3 for 14 in game 7. Like, it
Started over 7 too.
right, it gave off just gave up on it vibes.
They had 27 points at halftime of a game 7 on their home floor. That is
Oof.
inexplicable for a team that won 64 games in the
Yeah.
regular season. I mean, it's one thing if you lose in the conference finals to Golden State. Like, look, it is what it is. You lose to Steph Curry, I think you can go home and say, hey, we made a heck of a run at it. This is a really a bitter pill to swallow if you're Phoenix, without a doubt. Obviously, for Chris Paul, who's still searching for his first ring, for
Mhm.
Phoenix, who's searching for their first ring, who's been tantalizingly close for the last 3
And
decades.
I'll tell you what, this was the year. This was it.
Sure
If you
felt
were
like
gonna
it.
do it, this was the year
Yeah.
because you had all the momentum, you had the best record in the league. You lost it last year, you came out firing, you were ready to go. I wonder if there's a level of they burnt themselves out getting so many wins and trying so hard during the season. It doesn't feel that way. Like I hate saying that, but maybe there is a level of that.
I mean, and I'm sure again we'll have plenty of time to talk about these rumors, but I think it's pretty clear as well that DeAndre Ayton, I don't think is coming back. Like what you knew the contract was going to hang over the season the whole way, because they didn't. I mean, after they made the run, they got Mikal Bridges locked up. They signed Landry
Mhm.
Shamet, but they, basically said, kind of prove it, bet on it. It was working for a long time, and for it to flame out the way it did with him arguing with Monty Williams on the fourth quarter, not playing at all, like there are valid concerns there about what DeAndre Ayton is, whether he's going to come back, whether he's worth a max contract. Like it, that's a massive uncertainty now. It's going to hang over your franchise for the entire summer. And Chris Paul's age, again, he's 37 years old. Like father time gets everybody eventually. I'm not suggesting that like Chris Paul is not peak Chris Paul. Obviously, he hasn't been for quite a while, but he's been an elite second, third option here for Phoenix. Like he's still the guy.
Mhm.
We're going to see what happens now, but obviously a tremendous disappointment and now a ton
I
of questions ahead of them in the offseason
So
where
we sorry, we did this with the first round, right? We took
Mhm.
all the teams and we kind of put them in order of least most disappointing to least disappointing. So if we were to do that now, I mean, I would say thank you to the Phoenix Suns for making the Sixers not look as bad. And I would say Phoenix Suns are number 1,
easily.
Sixers are number 2,
Yeah.
Milwaukee's number 3, and then Memphis has not. Memphis to me doesn't fully really have anything to worry about other than just make sure Ja's not too injured. Like
There's
the
a
injury is concerned.
There's a hefty gap between the Sixers and Milwaukee is disappointing a little bit because Chris Middleton got hurt and it
Yeah,
probably cost you a chance to repeat. Like you never want to take those opportunities for granted. You know what I
sure,
mean? You also just won the title last year. Like everything is quite all right in Milwaukee. For Memphis, I think it's disappointing the way it happened. Just
sure,
with Ja getting hurt and not,
yeah.
really having all your full guys. You also did massively crush the Warriors in one game without
And
John
that's what I
Morant.
mean is you are to me the Memphis Grizzlies. I can speak
Right.
have house money on this
They
because
do.
everybody's so young. Your depth is great. Like you just tweak some things and go into next year. You're
The
ready to roll.
the challenge for Memphis is now they're not gonna be able to sneak up on anybody anymore, and that's
Right.
gonna be the challenge next year for guys like Jaren Jackson, for guys like John Moran and Desmond Bane and all these guys that took steps this
No
year.
one's sleeping on you now.
Yeah, no one's sleeping on you anymore. Can you sustain it? For all the Grizzlies, it looks
Unle
like have all the potential in the world. Like it looks like the sky is the limit, right? We've seen teams like that fade off as soon as they have it. So the challenge now for the Grizzlies and their ownership and their GM is to keep it together, keep them
Yes.
competitive, and get them in
My
like consistently at this level.
what they should do is bring up the Hawks. Show the Hawks example.
Yeah.
Went to the conference finals and just
Yep.
flamed out. I would say too, by the way, if somehow Jimmy Butler still seems to sneak up on people, and the Heat seem to really, even though they were the number 1 seed, I don't think people were really thinking they could
No.
do something crazy.
Jimmy's elevation has been remarkable, these for two. And you're right, we shouldn't be surprised by it anymore. But
We
like he's
shouldn't, but we
really
still are every
elevated.
single time.
Like it is like Jimmy is the guy. Like it was supposed to be with Miami where they kind of went away from that
Yeah.
fact, but no, he's still the guy. But yeah, I mean, Suns definitely number one because they were looking to win a title. I mean, so were the Sixers, but the Sixers, I think everyone realistically knew didn't have the depth to win a title. But certainly disappointing as well, obviously losing, the way they did. And then yeah, it's a hefty gap between Milwaukee and Memphis. You could flip either of them, honestly. Like to me, like Milwaukee just won a title last year. Like I understand the
But I
repeat
think when
disappointment,
you
but it's
right, when you win, there's an
and
element of
windows are short.
at least get to the conference finals to try to defend it
Yeah,
again,
but
you
I also
know?
think again, Chris Middleton got hurt. You
I know,
always
I
have
know.
that kind of to lean on, like
Mhm.
especially in a 7 gamer. It's like you can pretty convincingly argue. Like I thought Boston, we talked about last episode. I thought Boston played better for most of that series. So them coming back and winning 6 and 7
I
wasn't
agree.
even necessarily of a surprise. It was super impressive, but I don't think it was like the shocker of the century. Um, but again, with Milwaukee, it was like, yeah, it just felt like they were one gun short, and Chris Middleton would have been that gun for sure. And they just, it is what it is. Thank you everybody for listening to this episode of the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. Appreciate you guys as always. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. We'll read them on the podcast. If you're not an Apple user, Google Play Store, Spreaker, Spotify, TuneIn, anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us.
Yep, and find us on YouTube. We're looking for subscriber number 37. We post video versions of the podcast there. So for the pack rip midweeks, if you want to check them out, see the moments that we're pulling, you can do it there. And we will be back probably sometime early next week or end of weekend with a pack rip
Yeah.
with at least one at the minimum to open up. And they're going to be playoff moments from this year. The one I have is from round one. The one that drops on Saturday is from round two. I'm going to try to get 2 packs. Sometimes, I mean, if other people are in there, it's kind of hard to do. So we'll at least hopefully get one and go from there. And then it is on to talking about the NBA action all over again.
Yeah, I guess I should say the score one last time. It's a halftime right now as we get out of here. The Warriors are up 54-45. So we, of course, will be back
Oh, hold on,
more.
hey, hold on. We'll do something fun. Okay, for anybody listening to this, they already know the results. What happens in the second half?
Oh, you're asking me what happens in the second half?
What do you think happens? Who
Oh,
wins?
okay. I thought you were like leaving a blank there for somebody to tweet us or something. My bad.
No, no, no.
No, I think the Warriors win. I think they win. Like I'm not saying convincingly, but I think they win by 8 or 9 for sure on their home floor. Like I think they get it done.
Okay, I'm gonna call my shot now. Luka's gonna go off, and the Dallas Mavericks are gonna win.
He's got 18. I mean, Luka's got 18, 5 of 12 from the field. Brunson's got 8. Bullock's got 9. For the Warriors, Wiggins has 15. Steph has 12. Jordan Poole has 9 off the bench. Kevon Looney's got 8. Draymond's got 6. Klay Thompson's got 0. Over 4 in 19 minutes, but Warriors up 9. So we'll see what
Well, there we go.
happens.
All right, we will be back with a pack rip episode in a few days.